Anyway, name's Henry Rock, founder, executive director of City Startup Labs. Been in the business of developing entrepreneurial talent capacity since 2014 here in Charlotte. Start off with young black men like yourselves, right? And then we went co-ed, and then in the last several years, we've been working with formerly incarcerated folks. One of the things that we did in 21 was we acquired Black Tech Interactive and the Black Tech Charlotte brand. And the idea there was to really kind of recalibrate our work with millennials with more of a tech focus. And this series actually kind of grew out of our desire to kind of lean into that work. From an informational standpoint, much of when we talk about funding, much of the focus on funding is around VCs, around angel investors, around even friends and family rounds, et cetera. We wanted to take a somewhat of a different perspective and really kind of drill in a little deeper on some of these funding opportunities. So we start off the first of the series, the Fundable series, was with a focus on angel investing. So we had, and by the way, this material is archived on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and take a look at each of the prior two sessions, you can there. But the first one was on angel investing. We had folks from the Charlotte Angel Fund talk about that. The second session was on the SBIR America Seed Fund grant, and that's specifically for activating tech, sort of high growth, high tech opportunities. And the American Seed Fund is being sponsored in part by the Small Business Administration and also the National Science Foundation. So we had two of the program directors for that, and that's also archived at our website. So this is the third in this four-part series, and we're going to deal with PitchPrep today. And I'm going to take a little different angle on PitchPrep. I think you'll find it enjoyable. All of these, the series and all of the workshops that we're doing are sponsored by NC IDEA. So I don't know if everybody's familiar. You're familiar with NC IDEA? Okay. Have you applied at all for any NC IDEA funding? Did you receive any?
Well, I just applied for it. It was a grant they're offering.
Right.
It was probably like last month.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So I didn't hear back.
Yeah.
But they said they take a while to get back. So
Yeah. As a matter of fact, there's here at the Portal building, I don't know if you're familiar with the Portal, but at the Portal we have a number of entrepreneurial support organizations such as City Startup Labs. One of them was like one of the sort of the anchors. It was originally called Ventureprise, and now it's the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. They have run a mentoring program where you train mentors, and then they ultimately have done reviews of the NC IDEA grants. So maybe your grant went through this recent review process. So anyway, that's enough about me. We can talk about me. I can go on and on about that for days, but let's go around the room and speak with the multitudes. I mean, we want to find out from the multitudes here, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you. Welcome. So if you went to Eventbrite, you probably saw this at the top of the page, but it just really gets to the heart of what we're talking about here. The importance of this is, I think, is this piece here, that it generally takes longer than you imagine, right? A lot of this work in entrepreneurship has to do with timing. In fact, timing is probably at the top of the list or near the top of the list in terms of those things. By the way, we'll have leave behinds for you. So So much of what you'll see here will be as part of some material that we'll leave with you. Um, but timing is probably at the top of the list or near the top of the list in terms of the things that can get in the way of an entrepreneur's vision, right? You may want to do something today, and I can speak about this from experience, right? And I think we all have had this experience where you want to do something today, the stars don't align, right? Nevertheless, say a year, two, three, or more down the pike, the timing is right. An opportunity opens up that is a dot that connects to what you had in mind some time ago. That's part of the reason actually why I'm here in Charlotte, is because of all these dots that were connected. And why I'm doing this work with City Startup Labs is because these dots that I had looked at, didn't even know how to line them up, didn't even know what the dots were going to mean ultimately. And it kind of led to this, but it's taken some time. So, you know, this piece around it takes longer. Um, be focused around the fact that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to be an entrepreneur for the long haul. It's not some folks are so wed on an idea, right? And if this idea doesn't happen, then, I'm going back to work, right? As opposed to, well, that was just one of maybe a multitude of ideas that I'm going to pursue. One of these things is going to pop, and when it does, or if it pops and I get an exit, then I'm off to the next thing because I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And so that's one of the things I just wanted to make sure that we're clear that it's going to be harder than you think, right? Um, I think there's an expectation on the part of a lot of folks that because I've got a great idea, that folks are going to open up their coffers to me, that they're going to write this check. I hear it all the time. Well, I'm going to build this and then I'm going to look for investors. Well, just kind of flip the script, and we'll do that in a second or a little later. But just flip the script. How, if you were the investor, would you be investing in this cockamamie idea that somebody brings to you? No, probably not. So the notion that, because you've got a great idea, quote unquote, someone is going to invest in it or someone is going to lend you the money is often folly. So this is what we're going to kind of focus on. This is the how we're going to sequence through this. So we'll talk about the purpose of the pitch, really the fundamental purpose of the pitch, right? Um, and you know, uh, and the distinction between a pitch and then ultimately that what comes out, what results, or hopefully what results from that pitch, and then why we are wired for story, right? Because this is really key um, to this. There is, as human beings, there's a way in which we kind of gravitate to stories. Just like kind of think about, just imagine if you're sitting around the campfire and someone is telling a story and how enthralling that can ultimately be. Well, we're kind of wired for that as human beings, right? We're going to do some perspective taking, right? And then look at some different approaches to how you might consider pitching. At the heart of pitching is really selling, right? And I spent like, what, 30 years almost selling advertising, black media sales, by the way, right? During the heyday of black media and what have you. And talk about a hard sell, right, to national advertisers, right, trying to convince them that of the value of the black consumer market, right, about our consumer power, and um, we could sell circles around, my colleagues and I could sell circles around the folks that work for Time Incorporated, Sports Illustrated. All you had to do is say Sports Illustrated, and the door's open, right? You say, well, I'm working for Jet Magazine, and it's like, yeah, okay, what is that? Jet, you know. Yeah. So, there are different, approaches that we can take to tell that story. Um, and again, what if you were the investor, right? So we'll get into that, and what is it that an investor will be looking for as you present your pitch. And the last thing is the 4 C's, and we'll unpack that in a bit as well. Cool? All right. So, purpose of the pitch. What do you think the purpose of a pitch is? Anybody?
Get someone interested.
Okay. hmm Okay. All right.
Give a brief description of what it is that you of your business model.
Okay. Okay.
The seller and
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, actually, the purpose of the pitch really is to present your idea in such a way that you get a meeting with the person who is intrigued about what it is that you have to say, right? So you're looking to really kind of establish this conversation. You want to begin a conversation with someone, and that's going to happen when. By the way, we'll have slide. I mean, not slides, but we'll have leave behinds for you, so you don't have to take copious notes or photos of this, right? But you can if you wish. So I'm not discouraging you there. But the other thing too is that we want folks who are on the receiving end to really kind of think of themselves as a participant. You want to establish this sort of rapport and conversation with them, and you can do it quickly, right? You can get to the point such that they are intrigued and interested enough to want to know more, right? Want to know more. All right. So after someone hears your pitch, you want them to either feel something, know something, do something. And the interesting thing is I'll ask you, is there something common about these things here, these words here?
do it more actionable.
Okay. Anything else?
To get the person.
No, I was asking for what's common about
What's
them.
common about
Yes.
all three of them.
hmm
Find them to actually do something.
Boom. There you go. Right. So we're looking for some sort of action on the part of the listener, right? They hear your pitch. If they're not feeling some kind of way about it, well, maybe not some kind of way, but if they're feeling some kind of way in which they are willing to like lean in, let me hear more. I'm moved, touched, moved, inspired, right? There's something I didn't know, right? So that knowledge has piqued my curiosity, right? And then let me set up an appointment with you, or have you, here's my card, follow up with me, right? So we're asking them to act in some sort of way, right? So as I was saying earlier, so the real trick is to amaze folks in such a way that you get that full meeting with them, right? This is just the entree, hence the term the pitch. It's just just to get in the door, basically, is what we're talking about, right? Yeah. And you're not pitching your business as such, but you're pitching that opportunity for a meeting about your business, right? Because there's only going to be so much that you can say in the course of anywhere from, depending upon if you're at a pitch event, right, where you may have 2 minutes. I've seen pitch event where they had a minute to pitch their value proposition or their business model, and the guy was able to do it. I mean, he ran it down, right? Um, but you're only going to have anywhere from, let's say, a minute on the short end, right? 2 minutes, maybe to 10 minutes. It's not a whole lot of time there to really unpack what your business is. It's not a whole lot of time to have this interaction with the with the potential investor for them to ask the kinds of probing questions that are going to be necessary, right? So the most important thing to note, though, is that, if a pitch is brief, it's powerful. Again, if it has folks wanting to, feel somewhat, feel a way, a certain kind of way, know something that they didn't know, or do something, then you're getting them to feel not just eager, but as I said, desperate to hear more. Not just lean in and say, that's interesting, but wow, I need to know more about that. So I mentioned, this notion of being wired for story, and that, essentially we're talking about being hardwired for story, hardwired for story. Our brains, our limbic brain, that reptilian brain is like kind of wired for, tell me more, right? So, when you think about pitching from the point of view of this storytelling, now you're really approaching it in the way in which you're best able to establish rapport with someone, right? It's less so about, hey, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Nobody wants to really. I mean, you really rarely, I should say, going to have an opportunity to establish rapport with someone if you are coming across as the quote unquote salesman, right? We had to learn a lot about selling in such a way that we didn't come across as the proverbial salesman, right? The used car salesman, the insurance salesman. Those are the kind of ooh, man. You shake somebody's hand, it's like, you know, we're not looking to do that. We're looking to establish rapport, right? So the storytelling is an entree to doing that, right? And so here's some of the ways, and the way we're going to do this. And by the way, I suggest that you check out this book by Lisa Cron, Wired for Story. She writes it from the point of view of, if you are a writer or an author, this is how you craft a narrative, right? But this is so important for crafting a narrative when you're developing a pitch that I wanted to borrow from that. So the way that this is set up is that there's this cognitive secret, right? This is, in other words, this is how the brain works, right? And then there's this story secret, right? This is how you can set up a story that is going to ultimately establish rapport with your audience, right? So the first one is, you got to hook them, right? So how do you do that, right? How do you do that right from the very beginning that allows the uh, the listener, the audience, to think about, okay, well, what's going to happen in the future, right? They're compelled to want to know what's going to happen in the future. So you got to do that like right from the gate. You got to do that from the very beginning. You got me. Tell me more, right? The other thing here is, and these are just several that I think are powerful. There are more, but the few that I gathered I think are powerful. So your point is, like, what's your point? We often find that when people are doing presentations or pitches and so forth, they go all around Robin Hood's barn, as we used to say, right, and not get to the point, right? Well, part of the problem with that is that the brain wants to focus its attention on something specific, and it kind of filters out other stuff. This is part of the reason why this notion of multitasking is a bit of a fallacy, right? Because the brain is only going to really focus on one thing at a time, right? And it will filter out some of the other things. And well, let's put it this way: you can do it, but being effective is another story, right? So keeping in mind that the brain is looking to filter out a lot of other things, you want to capture the attention, and you want to have everything in the story that has to be sort of delivered on this. Everything else needs to be delivered on a need to know basis, right? So you want to hold their attention. You got them hooked. Now, how do you hold their attention? And so the way to do that is like get to what your point is, right? So we saw earlier, right? You want folks to feel a certain way, right? And if we're not feeling, we're not conscious. Right? If you're not invested with some sort of feeling, and it need not be positive, it can you could very well. I mean, in this case, you want it to be positive, right? But what you might find is that the way that you present the story can cause someone to feel um, repulsed in such a way that they feel that your solution, right, is just the thing that can alleviate that repulsion that they're feeling, right? So again, if we're not feeling, we're not really paying attention. So you want to draw folks in, you want to hook them, right? You want to get to the point, but then you want to have some sort of emotional connection, or have them have some emotional connection with your story. My wife is an abstract artist. And one of the things that often happens is when folks look at her work, they'll say, do you see that? Do you see that bird there? I mean, this is like some abstract stuff, right? You see that bird? That's a fish. You're trying to, the brain wants to make, wants to have something concrete and make sense out of something that's otherwise abstract. So we like to you know, um, either make some connections, or we want to be able to reference something that we know. It invariably it happens when when folks look at her work, and when you're telling a story. If you're not comprehensible, and that will come up again a little later, um, you're going to lose folk, right? So this notion of going back, what is your point? And then make it plain, those kind of work hand in hand, right? Anything that, is sort of conceptual or abstract, you want to make it tangible so that people can then connect with that. So I just mentioned connections, right? So think about it. With a story, you start at the beginning, right? And then comes, this journey, right? And if you're taking someone through this journey, you start off with this idea of what could be, what the possibilities could be, right? And you take them from, from the very beginning of what that possibility is to possibility fulfilled. Or in the case of some stories, the possibility is not fulfilled. But what we're looking for when we're pitching folks is possibility being fulfilled by this solution. Think of yourselves as entrepreneurs as fundamentally problem solvers, right? So you see a problem, both of you identified problems that you think exist, right? That you can come up with or that you will be providing the solution to those problems. But in order for folks to connect with that, you have to take them essentially on this journey of, here's the problem, here's how it's affecting you, here are the pains that you're experiencing from that, or that a customer would be experiencing from that, or potentially here are the gains that they could be getting, from that solution to the problem. So this is similar to this whole thing around abstraction. So the brain really doesn't like randomness as such, right? And so it's always, looking to for patterns or looking for being able to, sort of make sense of what it sees, right? So what we're trying to do is to, set up the audience, as I was saying just a moment ago, for what that payoff is going to be at the end. And the point we're trying to make with all of this, right, around this storytelling, is that this is the more direct way of really being able to establish rapport with your audience. This is the more direct way because you're dealing with the fact that we're wired for storytelling. So you're tapping into really what is almost like a primal instinct on our part, right? If you talk about data and you talk about the numbers and you talk about the percentages of this, that, and the third, you're not necessarily connecting with someone at an emotional level. You're not connecting with them at this hardwired level. Yeah, you're going to want to talk about that, and that's going to be ultimately an important thing. But that's not what's going to necessarily get you that meeting that you're looking for, where you can really expound upon those metrics and what have you, right? Any questions up to this point?
I guess and like I said, for me, when I got friends who are going through fundraising now, and I've seen it. I mean, it might be the elephant in the room, but hey, we're black. The money's mostly, with Caucasians. They might, you might walk up to them and you might not look like the person they're trying to fund at all.
Mm-hmm.
You feel nothing like this, like the type that they have, or a tech founder or whatever it is. Yeah, you talk and they're not really here.
Right.
So I guess I'm just wondering, trying to talk to the most precious thing we all have. Is it just really focusing on the most likely people that will pay attention to us, or do you just go around telling a story to anybody who will listen?
Well, and I really want to unpack that a little further, but I'll just say this, that when you think about selling, um, or you think about um, presenting your business idea to investors, either or, you could essentially, you're playing the numbers game, right? And even though we have a young lady in the room, as fellas, you know what it's like to play the numbers game when you are trying to woo a woman, right? You could go after I don't know how many prospects, and then you land the one that you're really looking for. It's a numbers game essentially, right? So if you're not in it to really win it, then and recognizing the fact that it is, you might have to pitch to 100 people, right? Right.
All I'm saying is, since we're talking about the fellas and
Yes.
there are five people prospects. But I saw her talking to three other guys over there. I saw her talking to four or five other people over there. She looks so flashy for me. I'm gonna still have strategy in who I'm gonna go talk to make sure that I win at the end of the
Yeah,
night.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you do want to you do want to be strategic about who you speak with. I mean, you're as a B Corp
Yeah.
and as a social venture, you don't want to talk with folks that are, investing in, oil refinery. Right, right, yeah, 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 yes. You need that.
Like you said, that's what I did. I talked to 40 plus potential customers.
Right,
And some of them right away were like, hey, when you get your MVP, I want to test it out.
right.
I want to take it for a spin. So I could see there are certain set of folks who, and again, these were Zoom calls. I could see their body language. I could see see, so I'm just wondering, so now I have a good sense of the target audience I should go after. I guess what I was saying for me was negative was, like you go to these pitching events or whatever the case is, and none of these people are probably really open or susceptible to what I'm saying. So I waste my time and go into that.
No, well, and again, we're going to get to some of this at the end, but the point and the rationale for going to those pitch events is so that you can tighten up your pitch, right? Yeah, you're going to hear, because you're going to hear from prospective investors that may be on the panel, maybe a judge or whatever, and they'll take pot shots and try to poke holes in your pitch, and this kind of girds you for how to go about pitch. The more you practice, the better you get, right? But ultimately, you're going to be looking to present your business to pitch your business, right? For the let's say you set up an appointment with an investor, right? And you have, on my clock, I got like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to talk with you, right? Now, if I'm really interested, then we can come back and we can really unpack what it is that you have. But you have you were saying earlier, that elevator pitch. If you don't practice that 5 minutes that that prospective investor will give you will be for naught. That'll be wasted time on his part and your part, right?
Okay, I was thinking more, what is the elevator? It's the 15 second thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, if I have 15, or if this person only has 15 seconds. And again, like I said, I already know the odds in my favor. I don't look like the person he's trying to look at. Should I save all those 15 seconds I'd be wasting on folks like him and put it in the 5 minutes on somebody who I think will actually pay attention?
I would say talk to everybody,
Okay.
right? Pitch your dog, right? Because you get the practice, right? You get the practice. You refine what it is, and when you do that 15 second, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but let's say the elevator pitch. You got like 30 seconds, a minute at most, but 30 seconds to tell your story. You're looking to establish some rapport, right? You want someone to say, "Wow, I didn't know that. Um, wow, you struck a nerve with me, right? Um, or I find what you're saying so compelling that I want to hear more, right? So let's set up that appointment, and then the rest of it is up to you. The quality, the caliber of your idea, right? What you've been able to do to demonstrate its viability, feasibility and all that, right? But bottom line is we want to get in the door, right? We want to be able to have that meeting, and practice, as they say, makes perfect, So I wouldn't poo-poo those pitch events. They may seem like it's a waste of time and so forth, but what it does is it sharpens the saw, right? And I think that's critical to this. And then the other thing too is then so there's another thing that I think is really important if we're going to be straight up about it, because you referenced it. You were saying, like, most of the folks don't look like us, right? Not interested in our ventures, right? Well, then now you've disqualified yourself right from the gate, right? You just said, hey, listen, these folk aren't interested in me. So you've already established it's not necessarily a barrier between you and them, but it's a barrier up here that you need to, overcome, I'll say. Not to, belabor this whole thing about when I was selling advertising, but the bottom line was I did speak with white folks all the time, right? Over and over and over again, and tell the same story over and over and over again to a whole different set of folk that didn't think there was any value and spending money and on black folk and what have you. I mean, if your skin is thin, then that's not the business for you, right? But if you believe wholeheartedly in the mission, then you arm up, get armored up, and go for battle, right? Yeah. Right. Right. Okay.
Should I focus more so on the more likely people that will pay attention to
Ultimately, yes. Ultimately, yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ultimately,
I
yes.
would rather just talk to 500 B Corps or impact investors
Yes.
and get told 90% of the time
Yes.
than go talk to the oil executive.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's
You gotta know who your target is, man. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You gotta know who your target market is, brother. Yeah, yeah. And that goes for your customer as well as the investor, right? Because the other thing too is that if someone says, "Hey, listen, I really like what you're doing, and I want to be a part. I want to be advisor, which comes along with being the investor. I want to get on your board, that sort of thing. You got to be real clear about, do I want this person, right, all up in my business, right? Because it might not be a good fit, even if they do are in the position to write the check, So there's a lot that comes into consideration there. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you go for, you focus your attention on where you can realize the best, sort of return on investment, of your time, right? Yeah. So perspective taking. So again, this notion of wanting to make sense of something that's complex, right? Um, requires us really to kind of step outside of our own point of view, our own perspective, right? Because oftentimes, and I kind of alluded to this, we're going to come to these opportunities looking at things through our lens, right? And so, what we want to do is to kind of imagine how it might be from the point of view, the perspective of the other. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to be wanting to do that with um, who is this investor? How are they looking? Let me put myself in their place, in their shoes, provide some consideration on how they might be looking at this business. What are their motivations, right? This gets back to your point, Nathaniel, right? Nathan, excuse me. This gets back to your point. What are their motivations, right? And so it's incumbent upon us to like kind of turn the tables and look at your idea, your pitch, sort of through their eyes if you can, right? So one of the ways that we do this is through what we call attunement, right? And this allows you to sort of be in sync with how someone else is perceiving the world, right? And by extension, potentially perceiving your business, right? So this attunement happens when you have folks who are, the audience playing a somewhat of an active role, right? They're attentive, they're listening, but you want them to feel as though they are part of the story itself, right? So you want them to be essentially the catcher here, you know? The catcher feels like a collaborator. Once they feel sort of vested in this idea, and invested in this notion that you're presenting to them, then you know your chances for rejection are diminished, not eliminated. You know, you might be able to knock some points off of percentage points off of the possibility of rejection, but the fact that they are invested in this, as a collaborator, they are not just a passive listener to what it is that you're saying or presenting, right? So you to consider this. Now, this gets to kind of like who we are, right? One of the worst things that you can do is to try to adapt somebody else's persona, because people can see through that, right? Um, you need to be, we talk about being authentically ourselves, right? Well, um, and we'll say authentically you within the realm of business, right? So, you know, so there's some caveats there about how authentic you can be, right? Um, we should, yeah, I mean, but some folks don't really get that. I'm just being for real now. I'm just being, I'm being 100, and you'll be taking 100 steps out the door, you know. So the point here is to, like, where are you within this matrix, right? And you're not one or the other, right? You could be a blend of these things, right? But it's important to know where you um, uh, sort of where you, well, yeah, I was going to use the word err, but where you are fundamentally, principally, how do you show up? Because there are some folks that are really, really cerebral, right? And that, if it's done well, right, can get across, right? Because you're then reaching other folks who are cerebral. They're like, man, that's a smart so and so, and I can relate to that. I can identify with that, and there are other folks that, like really display like this leadership quality. And think about it from this point of view, folks, that, an investor is really investing in you. The idea is like comes along with you, but they're investing in you, right? And if they can see that you're the one that can carry this idea, this concept over the finish line and help to line their pockets and improve their bank account, then they're going to go for that. So they, fundamentally, they're going to be looking for some sort of leadership quality, um, but it's got to be authentic, right? And you this is in this quadrant here, performer or entertainment. You don't have to be like, like, yeah, man, and then crack jokes and all this kind of stuff. I mean, in order to convey what you think that that your audience wants to see. No, be you. But it's important, I think, for us to get a gauge on how that shows up in our presentation style, right? How it shows up in our presentation style. And that gets back to the importance of practicing, right? So that you're really comfortable with this. You're comfortable with sort of captivating an audience and getting them to feel as though they're a catcher, that they're involved, that they're drawn in, etc. All right. So I'm going to do this, and then we're going to take a break. So this looks like a lot of stuff, and it is, right? But think about this. When someone is listening to a presentation, oftentimes what they're hearing is blah, 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 blah. Mm, So if somebody's saying, hey, listen, we use digital signal processing in our hearing aids, and we provide, 128-bit encryption and portable devices. And like the person is like, wah, wah, wah. So what? What does that mean? What does that mean to me, as we used to say? What does that mean to me, right? But if you say, hey, listen, well, it increases our products' clarity of sounds. Well, maybe you have me, but then if you go on and show how this is applied, right? Again, telling a story, right? For instance, if you're at a cocktail party, blah, 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 right? So then it's a whole different thing from just saying that we use digital signal processing in our hearing aids. Oftentimes, I've heard over and over again in pitches where folks use acronyms. They expect the audience to know what the heck you're talking about, and they just all they're hearing is blah, whoops, blah blah blah, right? All they're hearing is this, right? Miss So and so is on our advisory board. Well, so what? Well, for instance, she's already opened doors for us in the industry. Well, okay, tell me more, right? So there's a difference there between just the stating the facts, you know, talking about the market opportunity in terms of this is what the metrics look like, right? And then making it something that's tangible and real, something that someone can that piques their interest, right? So that's what we're looking for here. All right, so let's take maybe about a 5-minute break, just so that you know if you need to use the bathroom, and there's also water fountains and so forth. Go straight through the atrium area, and you'll see an opening where the elevators are. Bathrooms are right opposite that. So we'll come back in maybe about 5 minutes. Is that cool? So getting to the kinds of pitches, right? So remember, I've been talking about selling, right? So there's a book by Daniel Pink and called To Sell is Human. Daniel Pink has written a number of books, all really quite interesting. But so he gives us several, sort of options on how to pitch. So I've pulled a few of them. So this one word pitch, right? Remember we talked, or I mentioned right at the very beginning, hooking them, right? You might be able to hook someone with one word, right? And you capture their attention, their imagination. And again, we're not saying that this is what you should do, but this is something that you might want to consider when you're dealing with a pitch, right? So in this case, they're talking about, a major ad agency, one that I knew of, Saatchi, right? Saatchi it used to be called, right? And they wanted to distill their brand down to one word, right? And that one word is pregnant with all kinds of possibilities, opportunities, and what have you. And so that's what you're looking to do, right? When you can distill the essence of what it is that you're doing down to one word, and folks are like, wow, you got me there, right? Um, how about if we said, and oftentimes you can use adjectives to convey this, right? Um, amazing. So when someone says amazing, well, what does yes? Oh, please. But that's like 3 words, right? Right, right, right. Right. Right, right, right. Yeah, but that's 3 words, right? Now, if you said do, right, no, but amazing. Okay, got my attention. Tell me more, right? Now this requires an extraordinary understanding of your business such that you can distill it down to one word. And we're not saying that your entire pitch is made up of one word. This is the thing that gets you to that establishes that hook that we're talking about, right? Right. So a question can be another one. By the way, let me go back to this. Reducing your point to a single word demands discipline and forces clarity. Remember, we were saying before that the mind doesn't like abstraction, wants to make sense of all of this, detail, wants clarity, right? So if you're able to distill your concept down to one word, it requires extraordinary clarity in order to do that. Okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Oh, sure, trust.
Okay.
Our whole platform is about verifying sustainable companies' third-party verifications. So if you say you're selling, but in a wholesale sense, it's like a good example is these are all birds and they're supposed to be sustainable, but I can't take their word for it. I need a third party person to show me that they went through their process and they verified everything they said. So I think my one word would be trust. If I just start with that one word,
Right.
trust,
Right.
because that's what the companies who are coming to us again. A lot of these ESG companies, they need that
Validation.
yes, they need
Mhm.
that 100% guarantee
Mm-hmm.
because they're putting these in their impact reporting and this and that. Sometimes there's these scandals. If the third party provider didn't do what they said, it affects the bigger company.
Right.
So that's what we're offering them is that trust because we're providing that third party verification and sending them all the details to prove that this person is who they say they are and what
Right.
they're doing.
And in a world now where trust is at a premium, that you might have a pathway there. The waters part. If you could do that, right? So, question pitch, right? This is another way. Remember, we were talking about the catcher, right? That level of attunement. If you pose a question that has someone really kind of ponder this, right? So remember this notion of feel, know, do, right? So the know piece can be encapsulated in that question, right? I didn't know that. Or what do they mean by that? Right? So the power of the interrogative to engage and persuade. So you're asking someone to um, uncover or take a step towards uncovering something, right? And interestingly enough, if folks agree with it or not, just by posing the question can be enough to capture someone's attention, right? Say, hmm, you know, by pondering something that they haven't pondered before, posing a question. So, what I would suggest that you look at these when we say the question pitch or the one word pitch, right? It's really like how do you open up your pitch, right? How do you start your pitch? Do you start your pitch with a question? Hey, folks, what if blah 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 blah, right? Now, the what if blah 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 means that they've got to now be active in some way or another. They've got to, even if they don't want to, they're going to, even if they're on their phone, they're going to hear that question and it's going to actually cause them to respond in some way or another, right? Whether fully engaged or not. So that's like saying, don't think about an elephant, right? You know? All right. Now this can be a little more clever. And remember that matrix that we're looking at, and are you an entertainer? Well, you might want to take on a pitch that rhymes is more sublime, right? Can you pull that one off? Some folks can pull off like opening up with a joke, right? Get people laughing and so forth. And then now the guard is dropped a bit. So the same thing can happen here, right? Because what goes on when you establish a rhyme is that it kind of cuts through the clutter, right? And people say, oh, yeah, that was clever, right? Now the door's open, okay? Now this is one thing that, I'm going to end with these pitch ideas with this one. And if you I've ever watched any Pixar movies. And this again goes back to this whole storytelling notion, right? So this is their theme, right? Once upon a time, there was a, um, a major corporation that was looking to do social good, right? And every day, they were making sure that they were plugged into community, that they worked, that their headquarters were based in, where they were the communities that they were doing business in. They made sure that their employees were fully satisfied with the work that they were doing. They had environmental goals. Every day they did that. But one day, right? One day, um, at a shareholders meeting, a rogue shareholder came up and said, "Hey, listen, this is affecting my, the bottom line, my personal bottom line on my portfolio that includes shares of this company." And because of that, right, the company had to rethink their ESG goals, right? You dig? And because of that, right, they ended up doubling down on their ESG goals because they said we're not going to be intimidated by rogue investors. In fact, we don't want investors that take that position because our company has this kind of profile, right? And finally, they were able to convince more investors who didn't even know that this company had that. So you see the point, right? You can take someone on this journey, right? And this particular way has worked for Pixar. They do all their movies like that, right? So this could be very much a way in which you engage your audience around how you tell this story. You don't have to say once upon a time, right? You don't have to do it like that, but you can use this format as a way of being able to convey the story of the idea or to be able to convey the idea in such a way that is really compelling, right? All right. So two things here. One is how you create an image of what the world would be like before your business and what it looks like now that your business is fully realized, right? And and really, what we're talking about here is not just fanciful, right? You really do need to think about what the impact can be. As it says right here, not just marginal improvement of something that's already in place. You mentioned before disruption, right? And there's all this talk about disruption, but let's face it, from the mid 90s, starting with a Napster, right? And how it disrupted the music industry. Amazon early on, how it disrupted book selling, right? Because we used to go to Barnes and Noble and Borders books, right? And on and on. You can go down the list. Yeah, publishing, movies, the whole nine. Disruption is happening, right? And so we're talking about substantial impact. What does the world look like? What did the world look like before Amazon hit the scene? What did the world look like before this, right? I mean, I remember that. I'm old enough to remember. As a matter of fact, I was in Omaha the other day, and so we're at this sort of innovation center there on this college campus, and, and my colleague says, "What's that?" Right? And on the wall was this payphone, right? We're just cracking up, like, whoa, you talk about a relic, man. This is like, that's, whoa, my goodness, right? So, what does the world look like before us, and what does it look like after us? That that now you're talking about painting a picture, right? Painting a picture. Now you have folks leaning in, like, tell not just tell me more, but here's my card. Let's set up that meeting so you can really unpack this thing, because I was truly intrigued by this. The other thing is, whoops, sorry. The other thing is, your business got to be a money pump. Let's face it. If it's not pumping money, then an investor is not going to be interested. Might as well get a grant, you know. And trust me, I know about getting grants. That is some hard shit to do, right? Let's be clear. It's not easy to get, to convince a foundation that has one perspective this year and a whole nother mission the following year, right? And oftentimes you have to contort yourself in order to, you're creating things that you might not want to create in order to get this funding, chase this money, right? So it's important and when you talk about nonprofits, for an example, even though I'm a nonprofit, I think it's more important for us to be thinking about social ventures, right? The B Corps, right? Where you are doing good. You have that triple bottom line, right? You're doing good and you're making money. So the question is, like, what is your business model? Are you clear about that? And is it repeatable, right? So these are two things I want you to really, really kind of distill. That, what does the world look like? What's that dichotomy? The world look like before you now, and now that the world that now that you have, come into being, and what does the world look like after us? And then, are you a money pump? Because this is really going to be the thing that the investors are going to really hone in on. And one of the things one of the investors from the um, Charlotte Angel Fund said, you know, I invested in these businesses because I want to get a return. I'm not looking to do this because I'm being charitable, right? I do that too, right? I've got my charities that I support, but I'm looking to get paid, right? So that's what this is about, right? And being a money pump doesn't necessarily mean that you got to be a vulture, right? There's vulture capitalism. We're not talking about that in this case. Me personally, I'm not talking about that, but we are talking about getting paid. All right. So now this gets down to, if you were the investor. Remember earlier we said, how do you kind of flip the script so that you're now looking at your venture through the eyes of the investor? Here comes this joker talking about this is the best thing since sliced bread. Okay, so let's interrogate that, right? So here's some of the things that an investor would want to know. Right. You say that there's a problem we're solving. I told you we got. I'm getting notes printed up for you right now. Yeah, go ahead, man. Do your thing, man. Do your thing. I don't want to interrupt that. I just want to let you know that you don't. No, you don't have to apologize at all, bro. I'm just letting you know, man. You don't have to work that. So, you say that that this is a problem we're solving. Is it in fact that? How did you determine that? You know, um, you know.
I'm sorry, I got a little princess got to put bed.
Okay.
I'll look for the notes and
Yes. Absolutely. All righty. All righty. We'll send those to you because I think we have your. Okay. Thanks again for coming. All right. Be well. All right. So is this is this a solution that I like, right? Or, am I, like at least modestly interested in wanting to go further and learn more about it, right? This is the key thing. We were talking earlier before about leader. Are you the one? Yeah, because an investor is investing in you or investing in your team, right? Are you the one? Do you have the right stuff? If I say that, if I, you know, uh, you know, slice and dice your idea, and you walk out the door with your tail between the legs, then apparently you don't have the right stuff, right? Okay. The other thing is really kind of interesting, right? Are you doing it the way that I would do it, right? So I'm an investor. I have made money. I know how to make money, right? Would I do it this way? Or is it so intriguing? Wow, you've come up actually with a better way. I didn't consider that. That's interesting, right? And, is this something I got to move on now? Or can I just like, put this in the circular file? Right? So these would be questions that you would want to have. My man just split before. See, now we got our materials, and he just walked out the door, right? Yeah, but that's all right. We'll get it to him. So these would be questions that an investor who's listening to this pitch would be, kind of going through in their head, right? Now we really kind of, they want to know, and oftentimes you're going to get this if you're at a pitch event. If the judges are really good, they're going to start asking you about these questions, right? So we can go through all that storytelling and all that kind of stuff, right? And you got to get to that. You got to get to that quick, right? You got to take them through why this problem is a problem that your solution is going to resolve, right? But you want to be really clear about, and this is fundamentally about the why, right? Why is this even important, right? And that question why actually comes up over and over and over again throughout, the entrepreneurial journey, because fundamentally it gets to your value proposition, right? The why you versus that, why this one versus that, et cetera. So who's the customer? How do you get them? This is like really basic business model stuff, right? Here's my value proposition. Who's my customer? How am I getting them? Right? Customer relationships, right? What sort of channels am I going to be using to reach those customers? You got to be clear about that. We say there's a market opportunity. Well, give us a profile of what the competition's doing. What are they up to? Is there competition? Well, there's no competition in this. Nah, you know. Okay. Well, then what does that say about this opportunity if there's no competition here? When Amazon went into the book business, they knew that there was competition, hyper local with your local bookstore to a national chains and so forth. They say, hey, we want to disrupt that in spite of the competition. And here's why there's this market opportunity, right? Then the question is, how are you that money pump, right? And then you have to have an ask. And again, the ask would be, let's have that meeting, because I really want to drill down on this. I mean, I've just given you top line on what this is. But this is such, as you heard, this is such a compelling thing that we need to have that follow-up session, right? And then you got to anticipate that they're going to be, if you're again at a pitch event, and I encourage you to do this, because just do this over and over and over again, because you're going to hear questions, right? And be ready to answer these kinds of questions, right? Your customer acquisition costs. What's the long-term value of your customers? Where do you project your revenues to be, and why? How do you get to that, right? Because I see, folks coming up with projections, and it's like, well, where did you get that from? How do you justify that? Based on what? Grabs this, out of the air, So, and it makes sense to like look at these in like sort of 6-month chunks, you know, 5-year projection, that is like, it's not worth the paper it's printed on, right? Because nobody was anticipating COVID, right? Nobody is anticipating, or they may be anticipating now, the government shutdown. What's that going to mean? So any 5-year projection, you can't, it's just really unrealistic. But 6 months, you should be able to show what you can do in 6 months and justify that, or a year, 18 months out. It's about as far out as you really want to go, based on your forecasting, you know, because the market conditions change all the time. Yes, sir.
Do you recommend putting an actual dollar value on that ask in the first initial pitch?
I wouldn't. What I would do is this ask is for another meeting, a follow up. Yeah, yeah. And then when you come into that meeting, you're prepared to. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because otherwise, what's the point of that meeting? That meeting, you want to get down to brass tacks. You really want to unpack this stuff that you did in, 5 minutes. Now it's time to really, drill down on all of this. We don't have to take you through the once upon a time, right? We can get right to it. But you got to get there first, and that's what the pitch does. That's what hooks them right from the beginning, right? So, said this before, practice. It's important if you're going to do a pitch event, then you should be doing like 25 reps, as I was saying before. You know, even do it before your dog. Pitch before your dog. You got to pitch. Get really facile with knowing how to pitch. A shameless plug. I did a TED talk some years ago. You might want to check it out. Did a little pitch there. But the thing, and by the way, that pitch ended up like really kind of opening up the doors for us, because the Rockefeller Foundation said, "Oh wow." They saw that and they said, that's interesting. You guys, you might be up to something. So that then opened up the doors. But it took, I mean, I was pitching before then, but I would recommend 25 reps. Interesting piece. Steve Jobs, we've seen those pitches that he's done and so forth. I mean, this cat would be at it. They look so casual and almost a matter of fact, right? Walking around the stage and he's like, just talking. It seems like he's talking off the cuff. Well, that's practice, practice, practice to get to that. Same thing with a comedian, right? It's like, man, this cat's telling jokes like, like my boy would tell some jokes, right? But no, 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 no. He's practiced that for hours, right? So this is what I would recommend that you do. And this is key. Lousy at practice, you'll be lousy at the pitch, right? So football player, right? The power. We're not dealing with some Allen Iverson stuff. Practice, right? The power and the value of practice, right? Yeah, absolutely. So the 4 C's. 4 C's. When you do a pitch, you want it to be concise, right to the point, right? Because you're only going to have like a few moments to really get it. And we know, he was saying earlier, elevator pitch, right? Maybe got like 30 seconds to tell a person what it is that you're up to in such a way that they say, hey, listen, boom, I want to know more, right? Versus, great to know you, talk to you later, right? So concise, compelling, right? Draw them in. You want to hook them first, at, like we said right at the beginning, right? You want to hook them early on, right? Convincing. They got to think that this is like, wow, I think he's really up to something here. How did, how did she come up with that idea? That is real, and then it's got to be comprehensible. It can't be, we were saying earlier about abstraction. You got to cut all that out so that folks can see, this leads to that, or this can unpack that, right? So it's got to be, you've spoken with folk that, folk that, after you've talked with them for like 30 minutes, they're friends of mine that go on for like hours, right? They just go on for hours, and you're like, man, what did he just get to say? I was like, with this, I mean, yeah, right, problem, right, So, so you want to be comprehensible, right? So I say practice the 4 C's. Make that part of your how you, even at the gig, even at the job, practice this. Because actually, when you practice it, then as you're, becomes second nature, and then that's how you, operate when you're doing your pitches for prospective investors. And when we say investors, we're not just talking about, BCs, right? Because to Nathan's point, there are only so many opportunities that for us to get to see venture capitalists, right? So many, but so many opportunities, right? There's like only 1% of the deals that are done, venture deals that are done with Black founders, or right? And it's slightly better with women overall, right? So, you gotta really think about that. Is that to his point, is that where you want to go? Is that where, now, depending upon the deal, it may make sense. If it shows that this is a high growth opportunity and it's really scalable, like we're talking about 100x scalability, not 10x, you know, then yeah, VC would be the way to go. But then there are angel investors, right? That's another tier of investor that you might want to consider. A lot of us don't have the F&F, friends and family, right? But believe it or not, there is an opportunity that we can have with crafting a story to friends and family. And then the fourth workshop that we're going to be doing is about equity crowdfunding, right? So there's crowdfunding, you're selling a product and you want folks to, kind of, you pre-sell it and so forth, or a service, you pre-sell it. But then there's also equity crowdfunding where folks can take, you know, can invest a small amount. They don't have to be, um, either accredited investors or institutional investors and so forth. They can be like small folk. And that was the whole purpose of the Jobs Act, to allow for other folks to have some skin in the game. So that's another realm of possibility, right? Um, and the last but not least is, um, if and I'm a firm believer, frankly, of bootstrapping. Firm believer of bootstrapping, right? You sell, because the pitch, right, is not just pitching to investors, it's pitching your concept to customers, right? Same thing applies here. That you, with the exception of, customers don't want to know what your customer acquisition costs are and all that kind of stuff. But the fundamental concepts about how you are selling or conveying a concise, compelling, convincing, and comprehensible product or service offering, right, to a customer. You get enough of those customers lined up who are willing to, you do an MVP, and they say, hey, listen, uh, you can pre-sell us on this because we like what it is. We like what we see. We like the benefits. We dig the features. We're actually, even the early customers are probably your best customers because they can be your advocates. They can be your, your evangelists, right? You want them, and those could be the ones that actually help to fuel the business, right? So you might not just solely think about this from the point of view of the traditional investment route, but think about it. If you get that traction, then we're in Banktown here, right? And bankers are looking for new commercial customers, right? And if you present a credible enough case, and not, the big banks may not be, as he was saying, the best uh, um, investors or lenders to go after, right? But they're community banks here, right? There are credit unions, right? And I know that a lot of folks are adverse to taking on debt, but if you're a money pump, right, then that's just a line item, right? That debt service is just a line item, right? It's an expense. It's not the big bugaboo, right?
Is that what you call venture debt? Would that be the same as venture debt? Finding someone that maybe have like a credit card, someone that has like a large credit card, you can leverage their credit card for your business, pay their credit card back because you got a money pump coming through your business,
Yeah,
and then give them either revenue share or a percentage to.
yeah. I mean, there are any number of stories of folks funding their business on a credit card. I mean, that's just like one of the ways it happens. But you got to have your business model such that that you are going to be able to, when that note comes, that you'll be able to pay it, right? Because with revenue that you generated, right? So, the um, bootstrapping method, I think, is a way for us to get traction. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for some traction. Then an investor can or lender can help us with some momentum, right? And let's face it, these banks don't just operate on folks that are individual consumer customers. They're dealing with, nor are they just dealing with high net worth individuals who they're doing their wealth funds for and all that kind of stuff. They're dealing with commercial clients, right? They're dealing with other businesses and so having a good banker is not a bad thing to have, right? So anyway, that's the pitch prep. Want to hear some comments before we break camp, or some questions or whatever. And I want to thank you all for your attendance here tonight.
I think for what you said, I never thought about bootstrapping could be a mechanism to gain traction. I never looked at it that way. I looked at the way of like, well, I got to figure out how to get it. And to your point, that's what I'm doing my business now. I got credit cards, but I know, I know I got it. But that's because of I believe in my money pump, and I believe in the product itself. But I didn't look at it as a way of bootstrapping or traction because it is, to our point, just like us saying that we're going to host these events, right? In the name of the business, but it's definitely a way for us. That's part of bootstrapping. We're financing it. We're paying for this stuff. But it helps me build my brand before the MVP's completed, right?
Yeah. So when we talk about bootstrapping, it's not so much about the outlay. What you were just describing was a marketing event, right? With the prospect of generating customers from that marketing event or through that marketing event. You need to have a call to action at that marketing event. If you so you need remember we're the CAC, customer acquisition costs, right? So you need to look at that marketing event as a way of activating customers. And so then you have to say, all right, well, this event is going to cost me X. How many customers am I going to get from this event? And you do a trial and see what the numbers look like. I mean, it's just like this here, right? We, we had X number of registrants. The room would be full if everybody showed up, right? So the same could be true with this, and determine whether or not among other marketing mechanisms to determine what's going to be the best, because ultimately what you're looking to do is you're filling this funnel, right, with prospects, right, and then those prospects are going to trickle down to your customers, right. You're going to have folks that profess some interest, yeah, I'm going to come, right. Then you'll have the folks that actually show up, right? Then you have the folks that are just going to be interested, and then you're going to have the folks that were like, that's compelling enough for me to actually, yeah, pay for or to be activated with that call to action that you have, right? So what I'm talking about with bootstrapping is how you get those customers, right? That can then fund your business traction, right? So you need to get and there's an expense that's associated with bringing those customers to a point where they are going to represent enough revenue to provide that traction that you're looking for, right? So be careful about the events. I'm not saying that you don't do that, but when you do it, make sure there's a call to action, because you want to really be able to, have folks see the value of it enough to say, all right, well, I'll become a member of your, you know, and realizing that it is this is some new stuff here, right? So we're going to ask you to, have some trust, you know, and become a subscriber, become a member. And here are the benefits by doing that, right? Here are the features that come with being a member, right? And then that may be compelling enough for someone to say, yeah, I'm down. But it's a funnel, and so you may have your conversion rate may be like our conversion rate tonight. You see, so that's something that you got to really test. You got to do a lot of testing there. Um, but even before I would do the event, to be honest with you, I would be, as part of your existing network, a- you know, query folks about what it is that they, what their pain points are, and what they're looking to, the pain and the gain. So it's about that value proposition piece. What's the pain, the gain, right? And you can do that by setting up a landing page and and maybe providing a little something like the top 10, whatever, right? So they come away and they're given their information, or they're doing a little survey with you that gives you a sense of, okay, if if this engagement that I have with these prospective customers can translate into X number of people showing up at a live event, right? Then translates to Y number of folks that would be willing to actually subscribe to the service or become a member. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Incentivizing them to sign up on these platforms, and this random person that signs up for this, service can win, X amount of dollars at this event. Make sure they sign up for that.
Right, right. But now you're dealing with a whole lot of, I mean, there is a world filled with attention grabbers, right? So how do you cut through that? That's another thing.
I didn't never see the correlation with pitch deck into another meeting. I
Hmm.
was always pitch deck being to get somebody to say, hey, got throw some money at you.
Hmm.
But the way that you presented it lets you go in at a different angle. Just setting up for the next meeting.
Absolutely.
When we set up for the next meeting, now it gives us something to be more concise, compelling, and to focus on the elevator pitch.
Right,
So
because again, if you're putting yourself in the investor's seat, right, you're switching things around, you're putting yourself in their shoes, if you will. Are they gonna like just open up the checkbook? Rather, would you open up the checkbook for somebody that just comes in with 5 minutes and says, "Bam"? We saw what that looked like when we went through a whole national election, right? Around that, right? So we're trust is a thing, and so folks are like, they're not just that doesn't happen. It does happen that it opens up. Now, there are pitch events, right, where the judge, based on the judging rubric and so forth, the winners of the pitch event will get like, a DAP. That's basically what they get. You know, no, very rarely are folks like saying, boom, here's 100 G's, man, because of that pitch, that 5-minute pitch you gave us, right? That rarely happens, right? But you might be able to get like, 5 G's, right? If if the pitch event is set up that way, right? Then it's got that kind of prize. But otherwise, it's like, hey, let me get some business cards, you know. And really, more importantly, it's not let me get. You're expecting folks, let me give you my business card because if they're not doing that, then there was something that fell flat. You're not having at least one person say, bam, that was, I want to hear more about that. Then now you got the opportunity to take an hour or a half hour, if granted that, to unpack this thing, right? Anything else? All right. So we have some uh, takeaways for you. One piece is essentially what you got here, right? And then there's another one that is with some more nuggets around pitches, a little different take on what you heard tonight, but it's really from the point of view of if you were pitching an investor directly. So hopefully that's engaging enough for you. And by all means, there are plenty of YouTubes on pitches. One of the series of pitches that you might want to check out are part of what's called Startup Weekend. Startup Weekend exists around the world now, right? Startup Weekend, where they bring folks that coalesce around an idea on a Friday. They do some customer discovery. Generally, these are web based um, platforms or app-based kinds of things, something that can be executed quickly. So they have a developer, they've got some folks working on the marketing, they've got folks out doing customer discovery. They come together on Sunday and then they do a pitch, right? And at those events, the winning team may get like, $2,500, $5,000, something like that. But the important thing about checking those out is how folks actually go about constructing a pitch over a weekend. and have all the things that we're talking about and do it in such a compelling way. It can be done, right? And then there are any number of other pitches, just like, YouTube pitches, just see how folks are doing it, right? Successful pitches that have won, you want to see how folks responded and so forth. And then, get in front of, get to be a part of pitch events here yourself, right? We've got something called Pitch Breakfast Wednesdays, right? There's also something called, I think it still exists, called 1 Million Cups, right? That's another opportunity to do some pitching, right? Just type 1 Million Cups, right? But Pitch Breakfast, you can also Google that. And this is an opportunity for you then to, to ply your trade, right? And get some real serious feedback from, investors and so forth, right? So, all righty. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all. All right. Yeah. Thank you. I think we got, yeah. All right. Peace and blessings, y'all.